So, there's still a strange sort of reverence for these techie types, the Silicon Valley sorts. I think we fancy these lads a bit more clever than they are. You see, the problem that I have with the modern conception of the intellectual is that, well, the modern conception of the intellectual isn't very intellectual. Technicians aren't intellectuals. Being able to code and standing on decades of work of philosophers, mathematicians, and prior technicians does not an intellectual make. And so when such folks take it upon themselves to wield power with a technology that is not of their own creation, or if it is, a very small portion of it is, this is really hubris, and it's a hubris that's enabled by certain societal conceptions, ergo why I've taken it upon myself to make this wee assault on this notion. Yeah. Currently in my headphones. Hopefully it's not bleeding through to my mic, but I'm listening to Bossa Nova, so I'm very sort of relaxed. Now that I've talked about what isn't an intellectual, let's talk about what is an intellectual. And let's talk about some of the baggage of even using the word intellectual, trying to define it, or getting even bolder, more dangerous, and more cringy by taking it as a moniker for oneself. Now, I could give a damn whether or not I'm an intellectual, but I do write, and I do engage in thought in dedicated and disciplined fashion, which really is what writing is. And besides paying attention to things like logical deduction, the structure of arguments, information in general, and trying to get acquainted with science, these are all, by the way, things that you can do outside of the context of a university. As I mentioned in my prior video, becoming an autodidact, while it is popular, still carries with it a certain stigma that is somewhat subconscious, because you don't feel quite up to snuff because you haven't jumped through some hoops. But really, the only necessary hoops that you should have to jump through are do you make sense? And I think that everyone with even less than a high school education can know when they or someone else is not making sense. Now, education can refine this, but what is education? Is education accreditation through a system of tests? And if so, how can we trust those tests? You see, it's kind of becomes circular. So learn what those tests are made of and test yourself constantly. It's what I do, and I imagine it's what most people do. It's just that they don't take that a step further and then use it to basically live life as an intellectual. My whole thing, I said I don't get mad, but I do have pet peeves. And an infuriating thing had occurred some years back. So I was just, nerding around. At the time, I had social media sites and such, and my friend sent me an invite to go to a free thought group. And I thought, okay, well, it's at a restaurant. I don't really dig the vibe of a free thought group, or any group for that matter. But, so I scurried along. And there, basically, just a bunch of atheist snark ensued, followed by some political discussions, and I met a fellow who was a head of a security company, and I think he kind of offered me a job, which was funny, but he was a Scottish Jew, which I found interesting. Anyway, he and I talked about politics and such, but the fellow sitting next to me had a Clemson ring, and I was in the business of talking to him, And midst conversation, I'm like, well, you said you had a philosophy degree, and what are you doing with it? Are you writing anything, doing anything? And his response eventually, like, became very dismissive and snarky, and I thought, so you're telling me you think it's better because you're afraid of producing bad material or redundant material to just not produce anything and sit on your degree and all the information that you have? You know, there is value in repetition. Cultural concepts, philosophical concepts aren't carried forward if you just keep them bottled up in the minds of people who've read some Plato in college. And is that really, for Christ's sake, is that really, like, do you feel complete in your understanding of philosophy, in your pursuit of knowledge after having completed that course? Now I can certainly understand, like, well, it's just not my thing, but to outright think that it's silly to engage in those kinds of pursuits strikes me as odd and very indicative of the kind of milieu in which we function, where everything is driven by whether or not something is marketable. And a lot of people whittle this down to, well, it's not practical. And they have this very kind of I wanted to say engineering, but it lends it too much elegance concept where, well, you know, it's not a bridge. So I'm like, yeah, well, you know, you listen to music. Now I've written an article where I say compare music to a bridge, but music does not have the physical utility of a bridge. You know, in order to have a functioning economy, in order to have a functioning society, you need a lot of things that are not tangibly, physically producing some kind of thing, like lines of code that produce a video game. It's to give a more abstract notion that the younger set will understand, or whatever. It's all just utter madness, nonsense, and the sooner we get past these hang-ups, the better things will be. The sooner we stop dressing like we're at the Gap and acting too cool for the room in terms of there's almost this communication through hipstery grunts where people basically just exchange various like expressions of disdain for any given thing. It's like, oh, you're one of those guys, or oh, you're one of these guys, or oh, that's one of those things, and this is one of these things, and we're above it, like we understand stuff. I know that wasn't very eloquent, but fuck. It's so infuriating, and I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I think maybe if you think about it, you might know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, another very meandering little bit of audio here. Not going to be a video to go along with this. It's just going to be a still image. Hopefully today I might at least get a poem out or record some music or write an essay, but I have errands to run. The mundaneness of life comes a calling, because without it I'm not going to have a computer or electricity or anything for that matter. So cha-cha. And if you like this video, you know, give it a thumbs up. If you're on WordPress listening to this, which a lot of the times that I get feedback on these things, at least in terms of likes, if not comments, would be on WordPress. Take the few clicks it takes to just give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because it'll help the algorithm and help get me subscribers, which, I don't know, will get me more feedback in terms of comments, because it's seen more, so more people get just comment on it. And also, you know, maybe make a little bit of revenue so I can afford, or more quickly afford, equipment that will allow me to go out and do more interviews and things of that nature, which are plans of mine. Anyhow, enough shilling. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much, and goodbye.